Welcome to Evolve to Succeed, the podcast that brings together entrepreneurs, founders, business leaders and experts to talk about their journeys and explore the link between personal and business success. I'm your host, Warren Munson, founder of Evolve, a coaching, training and development company focused on enabling business and personal success and creating a community of like-minded individuals. Whether that be through our peer groups, one-to-one coaching, our training and development programs for you and your teams, or through our content and events, our mission is to get the best out of each individual and inspire them to be better both in life and in business. If you want to learn more about Evolve, including our beautiful co-working space in Ashley Cross in Poole, then please go to evolvemembers.com, where you'll find great content, insights, details of all of our services, and also information on our forthcoming events. For now though, let's get on with the show. Welcome to part one of our countdown of the top 10 episodes of 2022. It's been another great year for the podcast with thousands and thousands of downloads and a growing weekly audience. With what I believe is a great mix of guests from different sectors and backgrounds, all with a unique story to tell about their personal and professional journeys and their definition of success. Since the launch of this podcast in late 2019, we've had over 150 guests, and it's been a great pleasure and privilege to talk to every one of them. Whether it's gaining new insights and knowledge into a specific role or sector, discussing pertinent issues, or simply opening up and connecting over shared values and experiences, recording this podcast has become a highlight of my week, and I'm already really excited about the guests we've got lined up to meet in 2023. For now though, it's a look back at 2022's most popular episodes, starting from number 10. So in at number 10 is Jo Colman, and if the name Jo Colman immediately reminds you of the mustard, you'd be exactly on the right path. Jo is part of the Colman mustard family. In 1995, Jo's grandfather, Sir Michael Colman, established Summerdown Farm in Hampshire to grow its signature Black Mitcham mint. From its over 100 acres of mint, the farm now produces an incredible variety of products, from peppermint oil and bath products to chocolates and tea. Jo is head of sales and marketing at Summerdown, and I was really interested in getting his perspectives on growing up and working in the Colman family, as well as the long-term relationships formed with the staff and the incredible sustainability measures in place on the farm. Here are some of the standout moments.
Well, we're a family business and farm. I mean, the farm Summerdown has been kind of with my family for close to 100 years, and had always been a kind of a very standard English arable farm, and we still do a lot of arable farming. But about 30 odd years ago, my grandfather, who was coming to the end of his career in his kind of first place of work, decided that he wanted to do something different with his retirement, and after realizing he could perfect his golf swing, he got a bit bored and started exploring the history of peppermint in the UK, and fell in love with the romance and the story of Black Mitcham peppermint, which was a very widely grown mint down in South London, in Mitcham, just outside of Surrey, for hundreds of years. And then during the wars, we turned all of English agriculture away from useless things like peppermint into useful things like wheat and oats and onions and potatoes. And so Britain, which had been the home of peppermint, suddenly found itself growing kind of virtually nothing. I mean, the peppermint in French is menthe anglaise. It is English mint. Peppermint is where the Romans first found, England's where the Romans first found peppermint. And so this whole kind of romantic backstory of peppermint led my grandfather to explore what mint was growing was looking like, and found that Black Mitcham had actually been taken by some farmers in north-west America, Washington and Oregon. And so we went over, we got some cuttings from some kind farmers, and we brought some back to our farm in Hampshire. and started with just a few cuttings, which we propagated in my grandparents' kitchen garden before planting that into the corner of one of our fields, about the size of half a tennis court. And it's from that very first planting that we now grow around 100 acres of black Mitch and peppermint across our farm.
Your family is part of the Colman family, part of that, Colman mustard kind of business empire, dynasty, whatever you may want to call it. And perhaps could we just, for our listeners, just play how that played out into the early parts of farm and the story, just to put it into context, Jo?
Yeah, so I suppose my family have always been drawn to kind of bold flavours. So go back a few hundred years, it was mustard, and so my great grandfather was growing mustard in Norfolk, outside of Norwich, and developed the Colman's brand. And for its time, Colman's had a really interesting kind of backstory, both from the branding of a product, so putting marketing on their tins. People really didn't do that. The way that they positioned their mustard was a really interesting marketing endeavour. But for me, the heritage that I'm so proud of is that it was part of that Quaker revolution in Victorian England, where industries, so the Cadburys and the Rowntrees and the Colmans and families like that, who were running these interesting businesses, they saw one of their primary duties is to care for their staff. And so there were almshouses and homes for their team, that there was proper education, there was care for their children, there was healthcare for everyone who was connected to the business. And it's something that carried through for many years within Colman's. And so my grandfather was the last member of the family to run the business, so he was chairman of the Colman business up until the mid 1990s, and saw very sensibly the way the wind was going, that you couldn't run a business like Reckitt & Colman, which had hundreds of products in dozens of categories, as a family business. And so he saw his role as being the last one to steer the business as a family business toward being what it is today, which is the Colman's brand, I think, is owned by Unilever, and you've got Reckitt and Benckiser holding the rest of the categories. And it was a very good decision, and that enabled my grandfather then to turn his attention from his day job, which was running a fairly large business, back to the farm, and started to think, what would it look like to do a large innovation on the farm to set up the farming operation and the business for the generations to come. That we as a family see ourselves as stewards of the land. It's not ours. It was the farm was mentioned and referenced in the Doomsday Book, so it's been around for a long old while as a farm in England, and I know that it's going to last a lot longer than I'm around for. And so we're merely custodians for the time being, and that gives us actually a huge freedom to make the decisions around what is it that we're trying to do. We're not trying to impress people. We're not trying to do things to kind of win favour. We're trying to create something which enables both the land and everyone connected with the land to flourish and to thrive, and see that continue for generations to come.
Was there always an expectation that you were going to come into the farm and in the family business? Was it a sort of done deal, or
I suppose
did you have choice?
I suppose it depends on who you ask. For me, no. There was I never felt an expectation that I had to do this, and there would be I'd be letting everyone down terribly if I didn't do this. And so as we say, we'll probably touch on a little bit about my strange kind of career to date, but it was never a done deal. And so when actually I joined the business 6 years ago, my grandfather was very clear. I was joining on probation. I had to prove myself that this I had to kind of come in and start at the beginning and prove that I had what it took to slowly take on from him a few more of the responsibilities. It's taken 6 years, and he's starting to let me have a little bit more of of an input, which is very kind of him. But he rightly reminds me that he has quite a lot of experience, and so there was no expectation. And I think that again goes back to the kind of family values that we have, which kind of wonderfully is rooted in love. And so it's a real joy to be able to work with my grandfather, and that being a loving relationship, and realizing that actually for a lot of the time we don't really talk about love in business, but it's something that I kind of think quite a lot about.
Yeah.
I not only from a subjective, I want my customers to love what we create, because I really think what we do is exceptional, and I really, really am proud of what we create from the farm. But if we're not doing it with love ourselves, and we just see it as either a means to an end or a commodity in and of itself, you very quickly lose the heart. And there's something just spectacular about the kind of natural environment that you can't but just sometimes stop and go, wow, this is amazing, this is beautiful.
In terms of both the business and in terms of sustainability, what's your vision for Summerdown for, say, the next 10 years?
10 years is too short. I'm thinking 50 years, Warren. I'm kind of.
Okay. You're thinking true legacy.
Yeah, so we're working through a kind of a 50-year kind of plan at the moment. But I'd say that Summerdown at its core is a regenerative business where growth for us is never at the expense of people or place. And we think very specifically about place, because in B Corp talk there's the 3 Ps of profit, people, planet. And so are you environmentally friendly? Are you doing it well with people? And are you a functioning business generating a profit? For me, it's not. Planet is vitally important, but I am so very blessed to have a little postage stamp corner of the planet that we are directly responsible for. And so my duty and the responsibility we have at Summerdown is to care specifically for this specific place. And I think we live in a world now which is trying to erode our through, I think, overconsumption, trying to erode our connection both to place and time, that we want to be moving far faster than is actually doable, and we want to be moving to different places all the time. And actually the farm is a wonderful grounder, that we are placed both kind of through time and place in space in a very specific place. And so it's the regenerative principles for our business is that growth will never be at the expense of the people we work with or the place that we're working on.
Coming in at number 9 is Ben Ashton, who co-founded the Good Oaks Home Care when he was just 22. The company celebrated its 10th anniversary in October 2021, and in that decade it has achieved incredible growth. Its year one turnover of £5,000 has now become almost £10 million, and it employs nearly 500 team members across 14 franchised operations. Good Oaks is also the first in its sector to go carbon neutral. Amongst other things in our conversation, I wanted to know from Ben what it's like to start a business at such a young age, find out what he's done to achieve such phenomenal growth, and understand more about franchising. Ben also had some wonderful things to say about the value of empathy.
So yeah, starting at 22, I think really was a case of you don't know what you don't know at that age. I think, there's a lot of youthful exuberance then, and at that point I just felt like I could probably turn my hand to whatever needed doing.
Yeah. Would you say that was naivety or bravery?
There's a fine line, isn't there, I think?
Yeah.
A bit of both, definitely.
Okay.
I think, over the years, I think the thing that I've definitely learned is actually how complex it is to run a business in this sector, or run any business really.
Yeah.
I think when you're looking at it from, so basically, just to take you back to the start, I met the co-founder of the business. We both stumbled into home care. So for me, it was straight out of university. I was saving money to go travelling.
Okay.
I applied for all the jobs under the sun, and the one that got back to me was care. The interview was basically, do you have a car? Do you have a criminal record? Yes and no, or no and yes, depending on which way around that is. And I said, because this is my first ever job interview, so I said, are there many other candidates for the role? And she said, oh no, you've got the job. Like, you've got a
You
pulse.
passed.
Yeah, exactly. You turned up. So
You've done the yes or no and you got a pulse.
yeah, congratulations. Here's your uniform. So it was quite a sort of rude awakening into the world of care, and that's where I met the co-founder, and that's where things really we got talking about how we sort of perceived the role to be, and the company we worked for was a great example of how not to run a care company.
Okay.
And I think, going back to that sort of youthful exuberance, it's always much easier from the outside. It looks a lot simpler than it sometimes is, I think.
But very eloquently, you do bring that kind of owner, manager, entrepreneurial passion to each and every hub or location, don't you?
You do, absolutely, yes. I think, oh man, I don't think I could go down the route of having, directly owning 15, 20, 35 offices, whatever. Do you think that's a bit of you and Darius, your business partner's kind of mentality is actually you like what you've got, you're passionate about what you've got, and therefore wanting to grow, but as you say, you're not into managing hundreds of people directly through layers and layers of management? Yeah, I think what we really enjoy is sort of enabling people to make us, to help them in their own success, I think.
Yeah.
So I really like working with other business owners, and we always take quite a lot of franchisors can be quite top down, saying this is the cookie cutter model, you need to do this, and basically that's it. We a bit more collaborative than that. It's more of a partnership. We call them franchise partners, and I think that's what we really enjoy is that collaboration and sort of working together and actually sort of solving problems as a network instead of just diktats from on high, really.
How do you go and sell and market your care provision? Because again, most care businesses they do some of that, but they rely on these big weighty contracts to provide a lot of their income.
Yeah.
So how do you go about selling and marketing the business?
Well, if you buy a franchise, I'll tell you. But
these are the secrets.
Exactly. I think really it's about we're not always marketing to the end user.
Yeah.
So our clients are almost by definition often quite sort of vulnerable and isolated, and are maybe not the people making the decisions about their care. So it's about marketing to the decision makers, I guess, whether that's professional decision makers or personal decision makers, the grown-up sons and daughters of people needing care, and talking to them in a way that they understand, in a way that's really reassuring, because I think most people know nothing about the care sector, and it's something that people don't really want to know about until they need it. And then suddenly it's sort of and people often wait until the last possible moment to organise care. They try and
because everybody resists or don't want to. They want to provide the support for their family member and all of that. And
absolutely, and there's a lot of guilt around that sometimes for family members that they can't step up and they've got other responsibilities. So it's a sort of delicate message to get across, really. But I think reassurance and responsiveness is also really important.
So you're 32 now. It's been a 10-year journey for you and for Darius, your co-founder. How have you and he changed in this 10-year period?
Good question. I think I've become just a lot less sure about everything, if I can put it like that.
Okay.
In that I think I've sort of become more and more aware of how complicated everything is in life, in business, in care, in whatever sector. And I think always sort of seeing the other side of the coin or the argument. So I think especially when you're younger, everything's quite black and white. You can make decisions and go for it. I think now it feels sort of 50 Shades of Grey, really. It's quite hard to sort of pick sort of definitive correct answers. There seems to be a lot of... So I think that's something that's changed for me, is being more aware of just the complexity.
Is that just life and experience, do you think? And that little bit of, I'm sorry to use the word, but naivety at 22 that's rubbed away, and it's just, right, okay, I get the big picture now.
Yes, I think that's exactly it, really. I think a combination of life and sort of work does that to you, doesn't it?
Definitely.
I think fundamentally we've 10 years is a long time to be in partnership with someone, and fundamentally, I don't think we've fundamentally changed. I think we're both more or less the same, that people that we started off as. More grey hair. People used to say, "Oh, you're young."
At least you got hair.
Oh yeah. People used to say, "Oh, you're young to have a care company, or you to have a company," and no one says that to me anymore.
No,
I've aged beyond my years.
In terms of your own personal values, what do you think of the values and principles that are most important to you, and do you think you've been able to reflect them into the business?
Good question. I think, so personally, in terms of my values, I think a big one for me is empathy and always trying to understand what, the person across from me or, that I'm talking to, understanding their perspective on things, what's their worldview, where are they coming at this conversation from, really. And I think that's really an important skill. And I think one that actually, there just seems to be less and less empathy these days. If you go on Twitter, there's very limited empathy happening there. Everything's very binary, and you're always
black or white.
It is, and
crazy world.
Exactly, and if people don't agree with you, they're sort of bad people.
Yeah, they rant and rave, and
exactly. So I think empathy is really important, and respect as well. Just having that sort of underlying respect for people as well, even if they don't have the same views or values as you. I think it's important to have that sort of baseline level. And I think both of those actually we have put into our company values as well. So they are sort of stated there as well. So
definitely. Yeah. It's great if you can join those two things up, isn't it?
It is, yes. And it makes sort of, it makes it a nicer place to work in. If people, if you're, we sort of have values-based recruitment where we're looking for, people have to give us these horrible questions about times that they demonstrated those values. But if you're, recruiting people that share those values, it just makes it a much nicer place to be and work. And
Number 8 in our countdown is Temel. Definitely what you defined as a serial entrepreneur. He has started, co-founded, and is director of many different businesses in many different sectors. For any of you listening who runs just one business, you know how incredibly demanding on your time and energy it can be. So I was curious to know and hear how Ty manages his schedule and get some insight into the immense drive and ambition that he has. Ty also recognises the responsibility an entrepreneur has to their community and is an ambassador and fundraiser for the mental health charity Dorset Mind. Ty is an inspiring individual who thinks a lot not only about business, but life and purpose in general. Where did your entrepreneurial journey begin? Because there's a lot of ventures. Which was the one that started it? And where did that journey really begin for you, Ty?
I would probably have to say all I've known my whole life is my dad working for himself.
Okay.
So he was an immigrant. He moved here years ago to give me a better life from Turkey. I was born in Turkey. I always tell people I was born in London because it changes their dynamic of me. But we'll go on to that later.
Okay.
So I came to England when I was 2, so I don't know any different. So we lived in London for a bit and we moved down south, but all he ever did was work for himself and my mum. So I guess subliminally it was programmed into me that you grow up and you set a business up. Okay. Do you see what I mean? So I never sort of saw the journey of
different route.
Education, a career, a development, retirement, pension. I've not seen that with any of my family.
Yeah.
So it started very, very young, very young. Me and Dad used to play chess a lot as a kid, and he would use that to teach me life lessons. So he would set up scenarios on a chessboard and he's a very profound guy, an incredible guy, talks in like proverbs all the time, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So it's like one of those and I remember being a kid thinking, what is this guy on about? But now, I look back and 99% of the decisions I make that I think an intuition or instinct are actually his programming from a very young age. Wow. But anyway, so my first entrepreneurial thing probably started at school.
Okay.
I got into a lot of trouble because my dad used to go to Booker's and Macro and buy stock for his little kebab van that he had that he'd park around and they'd shoo him on because he had no permission. Yeah. So I started going with him and I used to love it, all the aisles of all the sweets and the drinks. Yeah. And I used to buy penny sweets and cans of Coke and this sort of stuff, put them in my backpack and take them to school. So real hustling from a young age. And I grew it so much. I guess now they call that network marketing,
Yeah.
like Herbalife, etc.
Yes.
But I did it when that wasn't a thing. So what I did is I had got a male and a female in every class in every year to sell for me.
Pyramid selling.
Basically, yeah. I didn't know what that was.
Yeah, but it's
I was
true.
a kid.
You're a kid, yeah.
So they would take this can of Coke and sell it, and they would take the cost out, and they would get X, and I would get X. So I was eventually sat with this small little empire, and everyone was selling, but I was getting a cut of everything without actually now having to sell. I was just wholesaling. I was bringing the goods in, selling. Anyway, the teachers called my dad in, and they had a go at him, and they said, Ali, his name's Ali. They said, Ali, look, we don't know what's normal where you guys come from. This was years ago, obviously. But you can't be doing this. Your son set up a cartel in the school. The tuck shop's taking a hit. You know, like they were going mad saying, you can't be doing this, you can't be doing this. So that was probably my dad actually had a go at me there in front of the teacher in English.
Okay.
And I remember when we left the room and he was like holding my hand walking down the thing. He was like, in Turkish, he said, son, ignore everything I said in there. He said, never change. He said, keep going as you're going. Ignore this. They want you to fit into a box.
Yeah.
You keep
They
doing
want you
what
to comply.
Yes, you keep doing what you're doing because you've got something. I borrowed a lot. I borrowed from friends. I borrowed from unsavoury people. I borrowed from whoever I needed to borrow from because I truly believed
to make that opportunity.
I could make that opportunity work.
Yeah.
And I've always been brave and I've always been bold in this scenario.
So, do you think you make these decisions based on intuition and gut?
$1 million question. Yes, there's an element. At the time, I would have said no because I was young and dumb and thought I was so confident and I thought I could do anything.
Take the world on.
Yes, I'll take the world on. And as you know, as we get older and as we get more aware, we get filled with more doubt in life. We realise consequences. It's very weird because just quickly touching on like meditation or reading or journaling or all these things I do a lot of, the more aware I get, the more ignorant I wish I was. Yeah. Because ignorance is happiness. Yeah. Because you don't see anything else.
You don't know,
Whereas now I'm quizzing everything in life. I've always been the why guy.
Yeah.
But like everything, you know, I'm like even quizzing myself. Like I'm an ambassador for Dorset Mind, as you know. I do a load of stuff with charity and fundraising and helping people. And I have a battle with myself sometimes. I speak to the guys there and I say, am I doing this because I genuinely want to help and be a nice guy? Or am I doing it selfishly because of how I feel from helping or how people perceive me to be because I'm helping others? Yeah. Like...
It just blows your mind. You go too deep. Just, you know. And
so gut intuition, I think life programming from the old man, life lessons and little things I've seen and hear him do definitely have a feeling, a gut feeling from inside. Something's telling me yes. I don't know where that's coming from. Call it intuition, call it experience, call it whatever experience, but something is going, yes, do it. Yeah. I've not really been burnt going on my gut.
Okay.
My biggest issue, and Will Smith talks about it in his book, is I suffer with something called paralysis through analysis.
Yeah.
I'm a massive overthinker. And one of the reasons why I'm being so bold and brave in business, I was going to say this earlier, is really what have we got to lose? Yeah. What have we got to lose? Like I've opened a new coffee shop and gym, as you know, in the middle of the pandemic called Rise in the Triangle. And it's a massive overlay. I shouldn't have done it. Yeah. I should have recovered from COVID. I'm like strapped up to my eyeballs in debt in that place. Yeah. It's tough. The market's tough. Everything's tough in general. But in my eyes, I think of it like this. I genuinely believe in that project, so I'm going to do it. Yeah. If it works, fantastic. If it doesn't work, and my missus is always like, how do you stay so calm? Why are you not stressed? And I'm like, I am stressed, but what's stress going to do? Yeah. What does it change? I can only control the controllables. So if that business goes under, I say to her, what have we actually lost? Let's sit down and break it down. My ego's going to hurt. Yeah. My pride's going to hurt. Everyone's going, Ty's failed. Yeah. That's going to hurt a bit, but who really cares about that in deep down? Yeah. Again, as we will be forgotten, that will be forgotten. Yeah. The other thing is we're going to lose a ton of money. So we're going to lose a ton of money. We're going to then owe some money, but it's money. It can be remade. Yeah. There's no harm to our life. There's no harm to others' lives. That's really important.
That's a really important one.
They're the two things.
I think some people in business don't always comprehend that one.
Yeah, they don't. You're right. And this is why I'll never have a private jet. Yeah. I'll never be that wealthy. I'll never be an Elon Musk. Yeah. I don't want to be either.
Because you have to. This is probably a sweeping statement, but you probably have to get to the point where you are doing that at the detriment and hurting
You
others.
have to be a little bit you and sort of like blinkers on, I feel, to get above a certain beyond a point of material success. I don't think you can get there without the detriment maybe of your wife, your family, your kids, your social life, your mental health, your physical health. The people I want around me, I want them to add value to my life. So if I'm around people, I need to make sure I add value to their life. Yeah. And I do not mean financially. It's literally the last thing on my mind. It could be positive energy. It could be that, that you're bigging them up, you're egging them on, you're correcting them on if they're going off track. If you know their values and morally, and that you're helping them as well. You're adding some value, your network, whatever it might be. You're adding some value to their life. And that's kind of what I try and do now. So, I'm not going to promote. If you're around me, you're never going to hear me lead you astray, really. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And and you're close to me, I will correct you as well. Yeah. Because we're humans. We get caught up, we go down a path that might not be in line with our values. And if you're close to someone, you generally know their values. There's your values, there's their values, there's societal norm, there's moral compass, there's all these, and everyone's got a different version of what that is to them. But I feel you have to be able to positively construct people around you. Yeah. And that's also adding value. So if I'm being an absolute knob, and my mates don't tell me, and I look back in 6 months, I actually have a go at them.
Next up is a personal friend, and at number 7 we have Darren Mooney, creative director and founder of the design agency Global Brand Communications. I've known Darren for quite a while, and I've seen him go through both great successes but also significant personal and business challenges. He's always been someone with a positive outlook as well as an honest and candid attitude. And it's these traits that shone through during the course of our conversation. Darren spoke with eloquence, humour and vulnerability about his highs and lows, and told some great stories about spending part of his childhood in Sweden, the influence of his father and uncle that it had on his ambitions, and how he nearly became a professional footballer.
The kind of story begins at 16 for me, really, when I had this really difficult choice to make. I was, loved football. I was at AFC Bournemouth, and and Exeter City have just kind of offered me a contract to go down there and kind of start my essentially what would be like a pro career in football, and I loved it, but I also had a really yearning for being a designer, and kind of influence from my uncle in America. He had an amazing life. He left the UK in the kind of late 60s and just happened to fall into the whole Silicon Valley boom. He was an artist and was in a bar in San Francisco, funny enough, and basically he was sat next to a guy who was having a drink, and the classic kind of on a beer mat story, and he ended up designing the first logo for Symantec on a beer mat in a bar in San Francisco, right. and then basically they grew and grew and grew, and then they recommended him, and he had an amazing life and drove an Alfa Romeo over the Golden Gate Bridge every day, and had literally Steve McQueen Bullet was his offices on the middle of the hill in San Francisco, and he had a beautiful house in the Napa Valley, and so I kind of had that as an influence on my life, as well as my dad being a pro footballer. And
two big influences in an early stage of your life, then two people you were looking up to, and
100%, and me and my brother were kind of influenced both, really, and my brother ended up going into a different direction, but my dad's football was a very different game back then, and my dad was a great player. He signed for Bournemouth. That's why we moved from London.
This was sort of early 90s, late
80s,
so
early 90s. Funny enough, they've got a reunion at AFC Bournemouth in a couple of weeks for the I think it's the 81-82 team, where they got promotion from the 3rd to the 4th division, and my dad's I think he was in his late 20s then, and unfortunately broke his leg, and this is where I love him a bit, and actually it's not until you get a bit older that you realise how brave the decision was, but the kind of English season finished, and he was just getting fit at that point to play again, and he decided to go to Norway and Sweden to get fit, it was only supposed to be for a season. And we ended up being there 2 years. So I kind of got plucked out of junior school.
So how old were you? So you're junior school?
Yeah, so I was 8 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, and then kind of literally dropped in a Swedish school where no one spoke English, and they were just learning English, thankfully. So that made my life a little bit easier.
When did you start building a team then? Because up to this point, it's you, it's Ben, you're in this together, you're building the business, but Global soon then gained some momentum, didn't it? And the team grew. So
it did, yeah, and it was interesting because I kind of found my feet a little bit and became very confident, and I loved going out and taking briefs and talking to clients, and as most people in the design industry know, that it's hard to do that and then go back and do the work, and present the work, and because while you're out there, there's more work building up, and we made that brave decision that actually it wasn't just going to be me and Ben as a partnership anymore, that we needed really to take on a designer, and we did that in Holderness Road, and that was really probably where it became serious, as most people that start their own business, the minute they become responsible for somebody else's life, that kind of changes things.
It's a wake-up call.
It really is, yeah. And we employed a guy called Lee. He was great. Funny enough, from one of the businesses that I worked, he'd already left and went somewhere else, and we stayed in contact. But yeah, I remember, we kind of then had to kind of move to a bigger office, and I remember saying to Ben that, there's no way we can afford 150 quid a month on an office, and Ben was like, I reckon we can do it. At this point we weren't getting hardly any wages, and now we spend that on tea and coffee at Global. It's just, it's crazy. The kind of, I remember, I never forget it, we were sat in a cafe in Holderness Road, and we just left the office, and we were looking at the numbers thinking, can we scrape together and commit to a year's worth of lease for 150 quid a month. It's crazy. The split between Ben and I, which happened coming up about 4 years ago almost now, and that was hard. Ben and I had known each other since we were 13 years old.
Started the business together virtually as teenagers.
100%. And his father retired, or was going to retire, and he wanted him to run the family business, which I completely get. And Ben stayed as FD of Global for about 7 years, and whilst I appreciated that, it probably kept us almost static, because it was hard to make the decision and be brave and bold, because I had another financial director that I had to get those decisions through, but also was slightly disconnected from A, the industry, and B, the business. So
no, clearly I've got some insight to that, but one of the things I admire about, both from your perspective and Ben's, is how you manage that as a business partnership. Because it's never easy. It's like it's divorce, isn't it? Effectively,
100%. It's a commercial divorce, and
so if you've got anybody that is going through that process, that is thinking of splitting the business or splitting from their business partner, got any words of advice for them? Yeah,
don't be afraid of the numbers. And it probably took us 6-7 months, or it took me 6-7 months to be brave enough to say, look, this isn't right. I want to buy you out. Put a number on a table, and thankfully we had you in the middle to help mediate. But it would have happened a lot sooner had I been brave enough to go, how much are you looking for? What's it going to cost?
So have that hard question.
Yeah, and
face
it's
down
hard.
The hard questions early.
And that's same with any separation or any, and as I say, it is, and the words I use is I've been through a commercial divorce, and that takes its toll on you. It's a tough journey.
So it's emotionally draining, isn't it?
100%.
As we said about all of that long-term relationship, it's parted. You might feel confident that you believe in yourself and you're on your own, but you must have felt for a little bit slightly isolated.
100%, yeah, and also it's quite emotionally and mentally challenging. I was kind of separating from Kate at the time, and I turned 45, and I was kind of really evaluating my life at that point, and I kind of look back on it now, and good friends and some not so good friends have told me that I was a mess for probably 18 months, and you don't see it. You're in it, you're living it, you're looking out thinking I'm all right, but actually everyone's looking at you thinking, this guy needs some help.
What effect do you think running your own business has had on your personal and family life?
It's a difficult one, because I kind of look back and reflect, and any kind of entrepreneurial man or woman will appreciate this, that's had a business for a period of time, is that your belief and your everything about you is telling you that the business is the most important thing. You've got to keep the business going to support your family, and but actually what you're doing is actually taking yourself away from that family group. And 100% to my from my situation, it had a massive impact on me, and I regret not being around, as much as I should have been for my son. But I actually believed I was doing the right thing, and working hard, and bringing in the money and all of that stuff, but it gets to a point where you kind of realise, and I guess it's where I got a bit older, where actually the business isn't priority number one. It needs to sit as priority kind of number one, but actually your health and your personal life need to sit exactly alongside that, and run side by side. Because if you're not healthy and you're not fit and you're not happy, you can't run a happy and healthy and fit business.
At number 6, and the last guest for this episode that we're reflecting upon, is Chloe Adams, CEO of the Art Movement, which brings art into offices to enhance the workplace and positively influence the people within it. Chloe's motivation behind the Art Movement stems from the fact that the average person spends more than a third of their life at work, and the office environment has a significant impact on our well-being. She wants to enhance the lives of both office-bound and remote workers through the power of art. Through this, the Art Movement also supports artists and creative communities, and offers art-based activities to instill mindfulness, reduce stress, and create connections amongst teams.
I found that I loved being around art, I loved being around artists, but I just wanted to get on with the business of something. And I did come away with this feeling that art kind of felt like it wasn't for everyone. It felt very cliquey. And I wanted to find a way to bring art to more people and make it more accessible, The number of times that we'll hang art in a space, we've hung it all up in a building, and I'll grab someone and say, "Hey, what do you think of the new art?" And they'll go, I don't really know anything about art. Clearly, I do not want to talk about how I feel about this piece of art. And I'll say to someone, "Well, look, do you love music?" And they'll say, yeah, I love music. I'll say, "Oh, yeah, I can tell you what I love, what I hate.
What genre music I like, the bands I'm into,
exactly.
Last gig I went to, all of that stuff." People just,
I've got it. And I'll say, do you know anything about music? Are you qualified in musical training, anything? Oh, no, God, no. And we feel entitled, don't we, to an opinion about certain things, certain forms of art. And there are others, I think, like visual art, which is much less accessible, and people feel very uncomfortable or not entitled to have an opinion, or unqualified. And I really didn't like that about art.
Okay.
I wanted people to go, "I love it. I can't tell you why, but it just makes me feel a certain way, and that's good enough for me. I think that's okay." There's this misnomer around, especially now that we have social media, so much heightened sense of comparison, and that we think there's like the silver bullet way of achieving anything, and there should be this one thing that I'm going to do. I'm going to find that one thing that's going to make the business successful,
and it's going to be instant.
And that's going to be that. And I'm not going to make any mistakes along the way. And if I do make a mistake, then it's probably not worth continuing with any of this.
Yeah.
I'm a complete failure, and I'll just go and try something else. And it's like, well, actually, you just have to make friends with that and understand that you're going to cock up 85% of what you do, but that's going to teach you 100% of what you know. So, how else are you supposed to succeed in anything if you're not willing to look like a bit of a fool
Yeah,
from time to
take a
time,
risk.
mess things up, and just laugh at yourself for it, because it should be fun. Like, it should be fun,
Yeah.
shouldn't it?
And have you had to change your business model as a result of the world changing?
Do you know, it was a funny... We had a funny 5 minutes, didn't we, with COVID and the couple of years
Yeah.
that we've had. This buzzword pivoting,
Yeah.
businesses pivoting all over the place. But, I'm a painfully optimistic person. I really, really, really believe in glass half full thinking. And when COVID came along, it was terrifying for everyone for so many reasons, but there is always opportunity in dark moments. And it forced us to think, right, what can we do now to meet a new need? Because it's not like there was suddenly people didn't need stuff anymore. It's just suddenly very quickly people needed
it
other stuff.
differently. They needed something,
Yeah.
they needed it differently
Yeah.
or delivered in a different way.
Exactly. So need didn't vanish, it just changed. And usually it changes at a slower pace, and
Yeah.
it changed very quickly.
It did.
So I think if you have that kind of entrepreneurial spirit, you just turn to meet that and think, okay, what we were doing and doing really well with yesterday, frustratingly is not working for a second. Okay, what can we move towards? Making art reduces your cortisol levels massively.
It's that left side, right side of brain engagement, which a lot of us in occupations and businesses and professions and just don't engage the right side of our brain in the same creative way as we should as humans, do we?
Exactly. Yeah, and we don't often get into this state of flow, which is hugely important, just to be present. And you hear, there's a snowboarder called Jeremy Jones who talks about the white zone, or it can be state of flow, or it can be mindfulness or being present, however you want to term that. It's that place where time is irrelevant. You are completely in the zone. You are not in the past, not in the future. And that just brings all your stress levels down. It engages that creative part of your soul, that is looking to express itself. And it helps to move emotion through you. And I think that I had not realised how powerful that is, especially in the midst of a mental health crisis, which we are very much in at the
and
moment.
will be for some time.
Oh, yeah. We've got some serious mending and healing to do, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah. And art really helps with that. It's a serious programme that really is developing people in their creative skill set. So if you want to become a better artist, but you just so happen to be an accountant, or you just so happen to be somebody working in a recruitment firm, art is also for you, and it's okay for you to come and take that part of yourself seriously, and for you to develop that seriously. I think people have a really hard time taking their creative self seriously. We want, I'm not an artist.
And why do you think that is? Do you think we leave school and that gets suppressed? I mean, why do you think that is?
I think that, unfortunately, the number of adults I have spoken to who tell me stories about creative shame at school. Some teacher at school laughed at their picture. I was talking to a woman just the other day. She's in her 60s. She was telling me about something that happened to her when she was 10. She was at school. She'd painted a picture of an aeroplane, and her teacher had laughed at her picture in front of the whole class. And she is decades and decades and decades on, and she remembers that like it was yesterday.
Still a scar.
And she hasn't
Still an
drawn
open
since.
wound,
And she hasn't drawn since. And the trauma that has caused, the shame that's then connected to being creative, quashes your ability to express that. And that's happened to so many people.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just been the shame and the creativity have come together, and it's this nightmarish, horrible, toxic mess that means that people are terrified of judgment when it comes to drawing a picture. I've worked with chief executives of very well-known banks who have nervously shown their picture at the end of a session.
I think I did the same, actually, Chloe, if I'm honest.
why
I
is
loved
why
art
is it so
at school,
scary?
Yeah, but yeah.
You know, you're public speaking, you're on camera, you're doing all these
Yeah.
things. Yet if we say, could you please draw us a picture of a dog?
Yeah.
And would it be okay if we all saw this picture? And we promise to all be very nice about it. The cortisol, adrenaline experience that you have off the back of that is massive, you know.
I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please join me next week where we count down the top 5 podcasts of 2022.